The NewSpace Africa Conference 2025 was held in Cairo this week under the theme Empowering Africa's Economy Through Space-Driven Innovation. The conference brought together industry leaders, commercial space companies, investors, and other key stakeholders in the African space and satellite industry. This week on the program, we look at some of the key outcomes of the conference, how they can be practically applied in Africa, and what this means for the continent's economy and development. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. The African space industry is projected to grow by 16.16% to $22.64 billion by 2026. Before we begin our discussion, my colleague Yasser Hakim spoke to Dr. Tidiane Watara, President of the African Space Council.
Thank you, sir, for joining us here on CGTN. Congratulations for the inauguration of the African Space Agency. So what do you hope to achieve now?
Thank you very much. We have to celebrate. We have to be proud of ourselves. It is clear that tomorrow our hope is to strengthen the governance, to allow Africans now to have a platform, a house where they go and talk about space matters. Secondly, to transform space science and technology to opportunities, to strengthen economy, to create more jobs. This is what it is about. And even to use space for security and defense, for a secure and peaceful Africa. And once again, space will be used for the African integration. It will be used for the African prosperity.
What is the strategy that you are aiming to apply in the next period?
Thank you for your question. We have made a kind of study on the space industry. And Space in Africa published recently on the health of the space in the continent. It is clear that space is soaring more than $23 billion. That is for 2026. And it is even not representing 1% of the opportunities Africa is offering. Therefore, space, in terms of potentiality, space industry in terms of potentiality is good. But when we look at the space industry, I may want to say, don't look at only the private company, the academia also. We have to be able to innovate and to change the way of funding space and science, meaning to go for partnership private-public.
Which countries in Africa are leading this space program, and how can you merge different parts of Africa so that they can benefit from the space industry in the whole of the continent?
In terms of space, nobody is leading because you cannot cover all the areas of space. But in some areas, some countries can be leading that, while others are leading on other segments. Whatever the level is, let's bring everybody together to allow countries that don't have any capacity, infrastructure, means, policies, pieces, to take advantage of those who have it.
What kind of partnerships are you seeking, and is China also expected to play a role?
Africa, as I said during my speech, we are open for all. There is no exclusion. We are friends of everybody. China is one of the key partners of the continent. Therefore, the space will not be new. Let's strengthen, let's look at how China and Africa can work together on space matters. China National Space Administration, the Lunar Initiatives. There are many initiatives in China, and China also is collaborating with our countries at the bilateral level. Therefore, there is a need to work together, and we will both make it. We'll be able to make it.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here on CGTN.
Well, joining me now to unpack Africa's space industry from Cairo, Timothy Adi Ashong, Director General of the Regional African Satellite Communications Organization, RASCOM. Also in Cairo, Dr. Nesrin Chihata, Senior Lecturer in Geospatial and AI for Earth Observation at Bordeaux INP. She's also the Woman Chair for the African Association for Geospatial Development. Here with me in Nairobi, Professor Paul Baki, Professor of Physics at the Technical University of Kenya and consultant space scientist and space policy expert. Welcome everyone to the program and thank you for joining us. Let me start off with you, Timothy, because the NewSpace Africa Conference has just ended in Cairo, Egypt, where delegates there discussed how to empower African economies through space-driven innovation. What are the key takeaways for you from Cairo?
So the just ended NewSpace Africa Conference brings together the policymakers, the stakeholders in terms of regulatory institutions, also equipment manufacturers, organizations such as RASCOM and other institutions. All together to this conference, we come to discuss the challenges of the entire space environment of Africa, and we find a common ways to work together. So this year's conference, specifically from the Regional Africa Satellite Communications Organizations, which is made up of 45 African countries, looking at strengthening its relationship within the member states and also strengthening the African satellite communication operators. During the meetings, there were about 3 different segments of the panel discussions that focused on the African satellite communications industry, the challenges, and how we're going to strengthen them in order to take over the satellite communications market.
I want to get your key takeaways from Cairo, Dr. Chihata, as well.
So I think the main priorities for Africa is to build an Africa space ecosystem that is based on local priorities and that is powered by local talents. It will be the big challenge. And the second point is to engage all stakeholders, so public, private, and NGOs in the ecosystem of space apps. And also we focused on regional coordination and the importance to avoid duplication in space infrastructures, for example.
Professor Baki, how do we see space-driven innovation empowering African economies? I mean, broadly speaking, in which areas in the space industry is Africa really investing its money, and what returns are expected?
Thank you, Beatrice. I think Africa is currently doing very well in terms of uptake of geospatial technologies. This is an area where you find a significant number of African countries putting in a lot of investments. And it is an area where there are very many new startups, mostly by the youth in most countries across Africa. And this promises to be the game changer in terms of job opportunities and in terms of growing the space industry, especially in the area of applications in the continent.
So let me come back to you, Timothy, and I want to focus on the conference a little bit more, because that conference was themed Empowering Africa's Economy Through Space-Driven Innovation. And many are going to be asking, why should space technology be a priority for African countries?
So when before space was seen by our fathers, our grandfathers, as something which is like superstition, let me put it that way. And whenever you talk about space, what our leaders will tell you is, there's no food on the table and you are talking about space. Let's get our belly full before we can talk about space. But here we are, the space industry, when we are able to implement it very well, can take care of all other aspects of the economy in terms of food security, in terms of our health, education, and everything. It is stated that when you look at the UN and also the AU agenda item, the agenda 63, about 80% of this agenda depends on space. So our involvement into space, or our space activities, when we take it very seriously, it will enable us to achieve the EU aspiration in terms of the Agenda 63 that have been set.
So, Professor Baki, should we really be investing in space technology when millions on the continent are still lacking the basics, you know, no education, no water?
Remember, we have the African Continental Free Trade Area. This will require significant investments in infrastructure, whether it is for transport, whether it is for energy and related things. But space, outer space itself, affects technologies that we leverage on Earth. For example, we have, in the power sector, the energy sector, the power distribution networks, because when we talk about an integrated Africa, it means that regions which have excess power will definitely export to neighboring countries. And so we'll have a very long network of the power grid. This is susceptible to space weather effects. Space weather are, conditions which arise from what the sun does on a daily basis, and which impacts technologies and can even disable them, so that you would experience very significant power disruptions, not good for business. And this is nothing other than what comes from space, which we must therefore monitor so that we are able to put in place some measures to make our systems resilient to such effects.
Right, so Timothy, I want to look at some of the challenges. You did mention that one of the issues at the conference was to look at the challenges of the space sector of Africa, because in 2021, the African space industry was valued at some $19.49 billion, and it is projected to grow by 16.6% to $22.64 billion by 2026. So what are the most promising technologies that can address Africa's specific economic challenges?
Let me give you statistics. About 85% of Africa is covered by foreign satellites. Therefore, this comes out with a very high risk for us because of data sovereignty and everything. There's nothing called security in Africa because you are not able to route the traffic within Africa, but it has to go outside Africa before coming back. And also, in terms of economic drain, we have the foreign satellites operators taking a huge money from Africa. And where does this go? It doesn't go to Africa. It goes outside Africa. Therefore, the repatriation of profit also becomes an economic drain on the continent. But then, if African member states decide to invest in our own, we're utilizing what we put out there, I think all this will become a thing of the past.
So, Dr. Chihata, that is a very interesting comment there. 85% of the continent is covered by foreign satellites. So, what are the risks here, and what are the most tangible benefits that space technology has brought to African countries so far?
So the space economy has first leveraged the ground infrastructure that is now available in Africa by improving access to data using, for example, ground stations to receive the data, or Earth observation data, or meteorological data. Many countries has developed their ground infrastructures, and for services, I will focus on the Earth observation services. So the main services for Africa will be in the urban planning areas, improving urban planning and predicting urban sprawls to better manage our territories. The second impact is on agriculture areas, monitoring crops, crop health, and also predicting yields, for example, to better manage our food security. And another service also which is well managed now in Africa is the disaster risk management, so early warning solutions and how to improve the crisis management in field, and how to locate humans or to give more help in field. Also, other services were developed on surveying for security and defense, about the surveillance of our frontiers, so terrestrial and maritime frontiers, monitoring illegal fisheries, for example, in maritime areas also, or mapping potential zones of fishing. So there are so many services either on coastal and maritime domain or for agriculture and urban services.
So there are many services being offered by the sector so far. Professor Baki, given the limited budgets that we've established that African countries have and the many needs of the basic services that they do need to impact their people, how can African countries sustainably fund space-related initiatives under these circumstances?
Yes, I want to believe that partnership is the way to go. There are many opportunities given to Africa by virtue of our geographical location. For example, because the equator cuts across Africa, we have the best sites for satellite launches the world over. It could only be through partnerships that African countries can pool resources to be able to establish these spaceports, as they are called, so that they are able to do business with and for the rest of the world. The other thing that I think would help Africa also is to be able also to look internally and do business with each other. For example, Nigeria has a telecommunication satellite, and so is Angola. And these two significantly cover much of West and Southern and Central Africa. Despite the presence of those ones, we are still going out there to do business with external partners. It would only make sense if regions that still are not covered by those two would pool resources together and put up their telecommunication satellites to serve their own interests and to, in fact, be able to generate business for development.
All right.
I think partnership is the way to go for us.
All right, so we're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we'll look at how the space industry can specifically impact Africa's economies. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Still with me, Timothy Adi Ashong, Dr. Nezrin Chihata, and Professor Paul Baki. Before the break, we looked at some key outcomes of the NewSpace Africa Conference. Let's now look at how the industry can drive Africa's economies. Dr. Chihata, I want to look at some statistics of exactly what we have in space. And experts are saying that the growing number of African satellites, there are 44 in orbit, 125 to launch by 2025, and that they are particularly important, particularly when it comes to our food security sector. In which areas of Africa's agricultural production can space-driven innovation be applied?
Okay, so from the private sector, so innovation can be in the downstream sector when manufacturing satellites and specification that are adapted to local needs, either in Earth observation, communication, or navigation satellites. Also, the private sector will empower the access to data by using data centers and allowing AI-enabled solutions also using data centers or high computing, performance computing. And innovation will be essentially, I think, for Africa in the downstream sector, so using satellite data to provide solutions and innovations. And as I said, that can be in urban planning areas, in disaster risk management, in coastal and maritime surveillance, in forestry monitoring, etc. And it will allow us really to adapt to climate change also challenges, and to have more resilient and sustainable cities and territories in Africa.
Professor Baki, when you look at how Africa is using technology for food security services, how does the use of these technologies though compare when it comes to health or the education sectors?
Thank you. I think the digital revolution is really taking shape in Africa, largely driven by the youth. Space technology provides the platform for the development of cell phone apps. They are digital apps which the youth are very good at, and which they have developed for various applications, including for monitoring our farms for production of food, and which even semi-illiterate farmers can leverage to communicate with experts to provide timely pieces of advice on how to address emerging scenarios in the field. I think this is an area of strength for Africa, and it is something that we need to invest in. There are low-hanging fruits with not so capital-intensive requirements. And these are things that I think we should put a lot of our investments in.
So, Timothy, this area of strength, the youth, the most connected generation of Africans in history, in which areas do you see Africa's youth particularly working with space-driven innovations to push this continent forward?
So it is estimated that about 60% of Africans are less than 25 years. This we can use as a potential tool in our hand, and as well as this can also turn into a potential harm for us, depending on how we use them effectively. So we can design the students, or we can position these students in a way that through their educational system, we're going to enhance the education system in such a way that before they come out from school, they will be able to build applications that can be used, or space applications that can be used by the industry in terms of rural connectivity, and also closing the digital divides in Africa in terms of agricultural productivity, and also food security, in terms of disaster management, climate change, trade and logistics, and also regional integration. The youth today has a lot of potentials, and I think we need to harness them through the curriculums in our various institutions. I had the opportunity to visit an exhibition in Barcelona early this year, and when you look at, there's a segment on the youth and the kind of works they are doing out there, which then feeds into the various economies of Europe and other places, is enormous. And I think that is the kind of things we lack in Africa. Therefore, we need to empower our youth in order to enter into the applications model to build very good applications that can be used by, or that can be integrated into the space system to drive the region forward.
So, Dr. Chihata, where do you see that investment opportunity for young entrepreneurs and startups in the space sector?
Indeed, Africa may seem as a market, a big market for space solutions, but Africa also needs to create innovation and provide its own solutions. And to empower youth, we can, for example, organize hackathons, empower them with solutions using space and geospatial data, and mentor also them to grow up and to go to the market, providing services that are aligned to the local needs. So we can mentor really all these young people to entrepreneurship and to have their own companies that are more aligned to local needs.
So I want to get your comments on the policy issue, because we've talked about the potential and the opportunities as being huge for Africa's space sector. And let me start off with you, Timothy. What policies do you think are needed to ensure that the space tech development is inclusive and sustainable across the continent?
We need to enhance our youth. with the basic necessities in terms of laboratories in the various institutions. Even if we are not able to do within each institution, you can have regional or district laboratories that our young ones, our youth are able to access and have very good educational materials that will help them and guide them through. Now, the ability for them to build applications to be used, to be explored by these space systems is the way forward. These are AI and software-driven systems. So when we are able to put this out there for the youth and taking the percentage of Africans, or 60%, less than 25 years, it becomes a very huge potential for us. Now, our youth can begin to design satellites at a very early age, go into data analytics, go into software development, and also some hardware manufacturing. That can be possible if the leaders put in the necessary investments. I think that Africa, we ourselves need to invest our monies into this because it's something we want to impact into the youth. Therefore, handing this aspect of investment to foreign entities, they will be able to tell you what you have to use this for. But if we carefully plan our youth stages very well and be able to inculcate this knowledge in them, we will be able to achieve the necessary investment in terms of output that we want to enhance the space industry in Africa.
Right, Dr. Chihata, as you make your concluding remarks, what is the future of Africa's space sector from where you sit?
Yeah, so to conclude, I think that Africa people and young people, and especially women, have to provide their own solution to create innovation in space economy. And also we have to really better coordinate regionally between different countries to avoid duplications, and we have to coordinate because the space investments are huge and not all the countries are able to have such investments. So the regional coordinator is a key point to develop the space economy in Africa.
Professor Baki, you have the final word.
I think what is the missing link is the national systems of innovation in the various countries, which will enable us to move from the innovation to the prototype and to production, which is basically manufacturing. We need to make our systems on innovation robust enough to enable us harness the innovations that are coming mostly from the youth in the continent. That way, we will be able to grow our manufacturing industry and be able to benefit much more from the space enterprise.
Indeed. Thank you all very much for being a part of this discussion. But that's all for this edition of Talk Africa. A big thank you to our guests, Timothy Adi Ashong, Director General of Regional African Satellite Communications Organization, RASCOM, Dr. Nezrin Chihata, Senior Lecturer in Geospatial and AI for Earth Observation at Bodu AIP, and Professor Paul Baki, Professor of Physics at the Technical University of Kenya and consultant space scientist and space policy expert. Remember, you can be a part of this conversation online through our social media handles on Facebook and X. You can also catch the show on our YouTube playlist. To keep the conversation going and join us again next week for more Talk Africa. For me, Beatrice Marshall, and the team here in Nairobi, until next time, it's goodbye.